first of all, just before we get into it, tell me your full name, Brandon, and where you're from.
My full Christian name is Brandon Gregory Mitchell, and I was born in Miramichi, New Brunswick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you've got an aunt there, I know, but other family around around there too?
Yeah, my family's quite well known in a small town. My aunt Jennifer, my mum died after I was born. She's effectively my mother, my parent. I joined the reserves when I was 17, as soon as I could after 9/11, and I ended up with a full-time contract in Gagetown, but there was a chance to join the British Army, and everybody goes out west, comebacks from out west. When you've been out west, I thought I'd move east, yeah. Since I've been 19, I've lived in England mostly.
I see.
I miss Canada.
Tell me, you started off our conversation mentioning you hit some mines.
Yeah.
Tell me about that story.
Well, I hit some mines. So Soledar is a town here in Donetsk Oblast. It's northeast of Bakhmut, and after the fall of Severodonetsk, which was quite popular in world news, that would have been in July, and Soledar and Siversk were the next targets of the Russian advance, and I accidentally fell into the work of civilian evacuations a couple weeks prior to that, and a friend of mine and we went to Soledar one night, and at the time I'd help maybe get one or two people per run into villages, towns, places that are all Russian now. We got 7 people out that night, one including a baby. But what resulted over the next weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, cumulatively, I would say between 1,000 and 1,500 people were evacuated out of Soledar. Towards the end of my time there, in Russian-held Soledar and Knov, I'd been working, and on my last run of the night, in a hurry to get in and out before dark, I drove over 2 anti-personnel mines. I ruptured my right tympanic membrane, my eardrum, and I'm told I have a traumatic brain injury. Yeah.
Well, that's a massive event to have to go through. It wouldn't be surprising if you had more than just physical damage, if you were very traumatized by it too.
For some time I struggled with it. I've read a lot about I've read a bit about TBIs, and a lot of football players or boxers. Boxing's my favorite sport. I can relate to a lot of their anecdotes, but only now after one incident, not a career of cumulative punishment. Yeah.
So, but you continue to work, as it were, even after that?
Always find a way.
But why?
Why not?
Well, I mean, there are many ways one can help with this war.
Yeah, I've heard all that.
Mm-hmm.
What, donate $50 to the Red Cross?
I mean, many people work for aid agencies, but they don't necessarily work in frontline jobs. So why do you keep coming back even after what happened to you?
Well, when this war started on day 3, Mr. Zelensky asked for help for foreign volunteers to join the Foreign Legion that he was creating. Early on in the war, there was a completely fictitious at the time, but it sounded good, a Canadian battalion defending Kiev. I found no evidence of this. I don't know if you have. I thought I would try my hand at humanitarian work. I've been out of the army since 2007. I've had no combat tours. I thought I would be a hindrance if I didn't have JTF2 Special Forces Delta Force training. I was asked to join a combat medical battalion in the Ukrainian Volunteer Army Hospitallers, and that's the reason why I stay. I have friends who are grandparents who are in this war. I have friends who are neurosurgeon interns who now work on ambulances, Ukrainians, normal Ukrainians who have been forced into this. Brilliant medical minds, people who've been disciplined and probably hopefully had a lot of guidance growing up, which I didn't. People who were on the way to the greatness in their own careers. I built kitchens for IKEA in Sweden prior to this war. They say all lives are equal, but in this war I disagree. Different lives have different value by what they can contribute to the good. Some of those people are my friends. I've had several friends that were personal friends who've died now in this war. So this is my war.
You mentioned to Stephanie, and she passed on to me that that this place here where we are feels a bit of a respite for you. It feels safe. Explain that to me, because we hear all the shelling in the distance.
Yes.
But it's for you. You hear it differently, I take it.
Konstantinivka. This could potentially be the new Bakhmut. What does that even mean? No. I've had a fairly active role in the war. I've tried to contribute where I can. But for over 2 weeks now, I've been working for a reserve brigade for another unit that is taking very heavy casualties. And for over 2 weeks now, I've worked like a nurse in a recovery house for people with mild concussions, frostbite, flu, cold, and they'll come for anywhere from 3 to 10 days, and they live with us. I administer IVs. I drive like a taxi between here and Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk to various medical appointments. With the head nurse, it's like driving Miss Daisy, and I often suffer with the guilt that I'm not doing enough here when I'm not busy. But to be honest with you, for the past couple of weeks, I feel pretty good. I feel really good.
I take it because the stuff you had been dealing with before that was pretty awful.
Well, there's some. I suppose there's some things that are quite awful. I don't know what you would consider awful. Some things I think are pretty funny. Maybe someday I'll have to deal with that. But when I joined the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, Hospitalers since 2014 has augmented to various army units to plug gaps in army medical. And you can have a quiet rotation, you can have a busy rotation, but in medical, no work is good work. And I struggled to accept that for a long time. And to be honest with you, only now, almost a year into the war, I'm starting to internalize that. I can accept no work is good work.
I know we're also talking to Steph about some of the people you've been treating, and you posted some pictures of Russian soldiers. Tell me about that experience for you.
Okay. Part of that guilt, I effectively missed the Battle of Kiev. I showed up towards the end of it. My first rotations were in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. I understand you've come from. An area between Hulapoli and Poltavka, and then a hospital further north. I first seen my first Russian prisoner, I believe, in May, and that was in the hospital, and there was great curiosity. One thing we're curious about, especially now in the winter, their clothing. What do they have that we don't have? Are they fed well? Are they hydrated well? Are they malnourished? So that was a great curiosity by everyone. But in reality, they're treated just the same as Ukrainian casualties. The only difference is an armed guard. That's it. Recently, here, we captured a Wagner prisoner. I found it fascinating. This Wagner man, he wouldn't have been about 5'5", 120 pounds. He was a scrawny little man, a long wiry beard. There's some very impressive beards here in Ukraine, and he was no threat at all. It's not for me to judge, but maybe some of the things we hear are true. He was malnourished. He was dehydrated. I have no sympathy for him, but if all those things are true that we hear, the best possible outcome for that man that he came to us with, I would say, a mild concussion. That was the best possible outcome for him.
You know, Ukrainians have very strong views about the Russians who are fighting them and the Russians who are tacitly supporting them back home.
Yes.
Where have you landed on that?
I think this war is a shame. I think it was totally not necessary, and Mr. Putin cast his country into terminal decline and wasted an entire generation. But I've made my choice here. Let 10 Russians die for one Ukrainian. A Ukrainian life is worth more. To me, I've made that distinction.
And how have you arrived at that distinction?
Because I've seen how they butchered people. I've dug bodies out in Soledar with civilian evacuation work. I met one woman in the village of Nevsky. She was a math and physics teacher. She showed me, you can look on my YouTube, I document all these things. She showed us the scars on her back. She was tortured by Chechen soldiers, her and her husband, and they were accused of hiding weapons. And they were told if they did not confess, the Chechens would commit another bucha in her house, a bucha in her house. I know personally of no case of such Ukrainian atrocities in their own country.
But you do of the Russian ones.
Yes, I've seen them. I've seen the scars on the woman's back. I've seen the bodies in Soledar, in East Bakhmut. You can't even drive there anymore in East Bakhmut once you reach the top of the hill. So I know a few, but after one or two, 3 or 4 anecdotes, it's enough for me.
What you're describing would leave anybody deeply affected, tormented, stressed. How you know? And I know you talked about the mind, but from a psychological point of view, how do you cope with that?
Well, I don't think a person whose biggest tragedy was coming home and there's no milk in the fridge, I don't think they would be very well suited for this. I feel at home here. I had to chase after a dog one day that had his owner's shoulder in his mouth, and he ran off. And I found that quite funny in the moment, if I can be honest with you, just because it's absurd. It's purely absurd.
The shoulder, his body.
Yeah, his shoulder, his body. I bagged him, me and my friend Nika, we bagged him up. He wouldn't, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But this was a civilian that was hit by a mortar. I don't want to sound cold or cruel, but sometimes all you can do is laugh. It's absurd. It's like a movie.
You know, we have just come from a funeral of a Canadian medic, a young man who died.
It was Greg, wasn't it?
It was Greg. And we know of 2 other British medics who died just before him. Your job is extremely dangerous, and there have been tragic deaths of medics. Do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't want to die. But there's other things I think about that are more scary. They're scarier to me. Yeah.
Like
you want me to? Oh, you want me to tell you?
I mean, what could be more scary than the end?
That I won't do the right thing. Quite often, I'm the driver. What if I get scared and I don't do the right thing? What if I don't go back in? I've never not done it, but my biggest fear, and it's decreased because I have evidence through action that I consistently do the right thing. But I'm terrified someday that actual fear itself might paralyze me, and I might not do my job.
Maybe I don't know. Have your friends told you you should take a break? This war is going to be going on for a long time. and maybe a few weeks or months away from this place might help.
A few months are not possible. I've lived in Sweden now with my partner and my dog.
Well, let me ask you about that. I mean, the minister was here too. We talked to her in Kyiv, Canada's defense minister, I should say. She was asked about Canadians who come and participate in this war on the side of Ukraine, and she really advised it against it. Don't do it. And yet you're here.
Well, of course she would. Of course she would. But we'll deal with the ramifications later. And there's no pension. There's no recourse to a certain degree. The men and women you'll find here consistently who are foreigners are what we call corporals for life, CFLs. Because they give you the shirt off their back and they tell it to you the way it is. I'm very appreciative of those ministers and those policies, those people who sign over, 200 armored carriers recently. I seen one the other day. And I said, and it gave me I haven't lived in Canada a long time. That gave me a lot of pride. Gave me a lot of, I can't swear on your network. I can articulate myself without swearing. Gave me a lot of pride. So I want to thank those people. But anybody who criticizes our work here, I don't need to justify it by them. Why should I cast pearls before the eyes of swine?
Any other questions for Brandon, Steph?
What is the most important?
What's the most important thing? Yeah, no, I tend to ponder off.
You can ponder off, that's fine.
I get a lot of messages from people. I started social media in May to raise money for the war. More or less, I've done fairly well. Probably about $200,000 in monetary donations. Different organizations have donated drugs well beyond my scope. There's so many people that want to help. But how does somebody help Ukraine? More often, we're seeing now Ukraine's fallen out of the news cycle unless something big happens, like the potential fall of Bakhmut. We held front and center stage until the Texas school shooting, which is an absolute tragedy. The people who support us, many people from Canada, many fantastic people, it's through social media. And whether they donate or not, they keep clicking, they keep sharing. These same people, they can lobby their politicians. What is it in Canada? A politician has to serve 2 terms to get their pension. So therefore, they have to give to the will of the people to get that second term. If you want to support Ukraine, just keep being a voice. If you have money to give money to give. If you have supplies that we need, not what you think we need, give them.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question. You've seen Bakhmut up close. You've seen the behavior of the Russians and the Ukrainians. Do you believe on the ground that Ukraine can militarily defeat Russia in Ukraine, drive their forces out?
I believe we can bleed them and we can bleed them, and this is worst case scenario, till Russia's manhood is battered so bad that they could not strike another country of consequence for 200 years.
Is that victory? What is that?
I don't know what you want to call that. Victory will be determined by whatever victory is. Victory for me, victory for many people, is full restoration of full territorial integrity. And that's not for Ukraine to determine, that's for Western countries to determine, that's for Mr. Biden to determine, Mr. Olaf Scholz, maybe even Mr. Trudeau.
Well,
but he can contribute.
But I'm going to parse your words a bit. It sounds like you have your doubts whether Ukraine can militarily defeat Russia.
Not on our own. Not without the HIMARS you've heard so much about, the javelins at the beginning of the war we were given, these Leopard tanks that we're allowed to receive, greater electronic warfare capabilities. Ukraine probably gives it 10 times better than they take it, but Russia's so big. We need help. I don't know what victory looks like. I don't know what defeat looks like. But that is dependent on the will of Western leaders. Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What's going to happen in Bakhmut? Can they hold it? It's not feeling good, is it?
It's not looking good, no. It's not looking good at all. Roads that we could use, and not to go into specifics, but you can look at a map, there's only so many roads into Bakhmut. Even in Bakhmut, certain roads, they're not viable anymore. After 3 or 4 vehicles get blown up on one spot, that's confirmed zeroed by the Russians. And it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter in there.
Those are all my questions. I'm going to ask you a few other things while JF takes a few more pictures. How much longer do you think you're here for? Weeks, months?
Well, the war wasn't.
What is that?
Oh, that was ours.
Going out? Is it?
Yeah. That was ours. That was probably a 155.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't even flinch at this.
If I went to Kiev for 2 weeks and I was away from it, the first 1 or 2. But it's usually an outgoing one. Our mortars make a real loud pop. And say if I was driving the road from between Krasnohora to Siversk along Soledar, which is, that road's pretty much gone now. So I'd be driving north to the left, to the west would be our mortars, and you hear that really close, and I get a little flinch, but I don't know. After a couple hours back into it, it's really comfortable.
It's an interesting word. Did you do medical training with the British Army?
I did.
Is that why you gravitated towards the
No.
medicine?
I did combat lifesaver, which I've been out since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Things have really advanced. When I came to join Hospitallers in Kiev, during the Battle of Kiev, I did 10 days training, about 12 hours a day, with Ukrainians, with an American nurse who was fantastic. I gave my first IV in training. I said, I've never done that. Someone gave me their arm. They said, you'll learn. And I blew many veins. But I'm pretty good now. I'm pretty good.
What I hear you saying, without explicitly saying, is that this has given you a purpose that's extremely significant and has become almost ingrained and infused in who you are.
Yeah. I really struggled with a lot of things in modern society, but here they don't really apply. They don't really apply at all. People are judged by their intent and their actions, not by what they say or how they word something, or this is.
You fit in?
I love it here. And I play a clown quite often, like a class clown in school, for probably my 50 words, mostly Russian. But I don't mind, just to make them laugh. It's the closer and closer you get to it. If you dress like this and you carry a gun, you look like them, you smell like them, but you're a foreigner, and that really does have a profound effect on them.
A good effect?
Yeah, a really good effect. Of course, we can't talk about deep and meaningful conversations, but yeah, I just really liked my time with them.
You know, it was so difficult. The Greg's funeral was one of the saddest events I've been to in recent memory. His parents were crushed, and his colleagues with the International Legion were also there, absolutely devastated by his death.
Yeah.
And I can't think that the family, I don't know, I mean, I can't think the family would have shared some of the thoughts that you're saying about fitting in and the importance of the work, because they've lost your son. I mean, the risk is enormous.
Yeah, and it's never going to bring their son back. I never met him. I know people who knew him, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know why, because it usually doesn't bother me. I have been a little bit affected by his death. I've run a fairly successful social media platform to fundraise, and I heard about him, and I looked, and he followed me on Instagram, but I never followed him back because I don't. So I looked into the man a bit, and I looked at his pictures of his life, his travels, places he'd been in the world, and he wanted this. He wanted to be here, and I think anybody who's been on the combat side as a foreigner, and we're no more special than a Ukrainian. Maybe on the propaganda, the information front, that foreigners are here and what we contribute in finance, but he was he was part of. Yeah, I was set back a little bit as I've looked. I never knew him. I was set back by that one.
But not enough to leave. It didn't affect you. It didn't change your trajectory.
Why leave?